The arena burned with sound and light, a pit carved from the bones of an ancient crater where the air shimmered with heat and the scent of iron. Tens of thousands of voices roared in rhythm, stamping the cracked sandstone floor as flames flared from bronze pillars around the ring. Above them, the alien banners of the Thralkai Empire fluttered like bloodied tongues in the wind. Each carried the sigil of conquest, twin blades crossing a black sun, symbol of a race that had never known defeat. At the center of that roaring storm stood a human man, bare-chested, bruised and bloodied, staring at a ritual he had never intended to join. His name was Kale Ren, an explorer turned captive, and by accident or fate, he now faced the deadliest tradition in the galaxy, the Trial of Ascension. Kale's heart hammered beneath his ribs as alien warriors encircled him, each towering over 2 meters tall, their green skin glistening under torchlight. The Thralkai were warriors bred through centuries of genetic refinement, strong, swift, and ruthless. Their rituals weren't sport but religion. Combat to them was communion, blood their scripture. He'd been dragged here as an intruder, an outsider who'd stumbled into their territory while scavenging old ruins on a dead world. Yet when they brought him before their matriarch, she had seen something in his defiance that intrigued her. "Let him fight," she'd said. "If the gods claim him, so be it. If he claims victory, then he shall be one of us." It was meant to be impossible. Humans weren't built for Thralkai combat. Yet here he stood, sweat stinging his eyes, surrounded by warriors who had never known mercy. Across the ring, a massive Thralkai champion stepped forward, her armor glinting like obsidian in firelight. Her name, the crowd chanted, was Vera. She was both executioner and priestess, her crimson hair bound in braids that moved like flame. The air seemed to bend around her, each movement deliberate and predatory. Her eyes, golden and unyielding, met Kale's. He felt the weight of that gaze like gravity itself. This was no ordinary duel. This was an offering to gods older than language. He swallowed hard, glancing down at the crude blade they'd given him, a ceremonial weapon, its edge dulled from centuries of ritual. Around his wrists, iron cuffs marked him as outsider. Yet something in him refused to kneel. The drums began, low, relentless, primal. The crowd's chant merged with the beat until it became one living pulse. Vera raised her twin blades, their curved edges shimmering with faint plasma light. Kale's instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. He stepped forward, breath steadying, eyes locked on hers. The first strike came like lightning. She moved faster than thought, blades flashing in a crosscut that split air and sound. Kale ducked, barely avoiding the arc, his body rolling across hot sand. Sparks erupted as her weapon sliced stone where his head had been. The crowd roared approval. He felt every grain of sand grind into open wounds, every muscle burn with exhaustion. He'd been fighting for hours, wave after wave of warriors before her. She was the final test, the impossible threshold. Vera circled him, her expression unreadable. "You breathe still," she said, her voice a low melody edged with danger. "You defy death longer than most." "Guess death's got bad aim today," Kale rasped. She tilted her head, intrigued. "Your kind hides fear behind sound." "We call it humor," he said. "Helps when we're terrified." The faintest smile tugged at her lips, gone as quickly as it came. Then she lunged. Their blades met with a shockwave that sent dust spiraling upward. He barely parried, the vibration jolting through his arms. Her strength was monstrous, but her rhythm, predictable. She fought like someone who had never been desperate. He, on the other hand, had lived his entire life on the edge of loss. Every strike he blocked, every dodge that left him gasping, was driven by instinct older than reason, survival. The duel became a blur of motion and light. Each impact rang through the arena like thunder. Kale's body screamed in protest, muscles tearing, lungs burning. Yet somewhere within the chaos, he began to understand her rhythm, not through logic, but through feeling. Every Thralkai strike carried ceremony, precision, and honor. But humanity thrived in chaos. He feinted, slipped past her guard, and struck. Not at her body, but at the joint of her armor where ritual had left it exposed. The blade bit deep. Gasps rippled through the crowd as alien blood, black and iridescent, splattered across the sand. Vera staggered, disbelief flashing in her golden eyes. Then, slowly, she smiled, not in rage, but exhilaration. "You learn," she said softly. "You adapt." "Fast learner," he grunted. "Bad dancer." She laughed, a sound that made the crowd fall silent. It wasn't mockery but recognition. Then, with renewed fury, she came at him again. This time it wasn't ritual, it was personal. Their blades clashed in sparks that lit the arena brighter than fire. Cale could feel his strength fading, his grip slipping. She drove him to his knees, one blade pressing against his throat. The crowd roared for the kill. "End it!" Voices chanted in the Thralkai tongue. But Vera hesitated, eyes searching his. In that suspended moment, Cale saw something human flicker in her gaze. Curiosity, respect, maybe even wonder. "Yield," she commanded quietly. "And die quickly." "Can't," he panted. "Not my best look." Then he did the unthinkable. He dropped his sword. Her eyes widened just as he lunged forward, catching her wrist and twisting hard. The blade spun from her grip, embedding itself in the sand. He pivoted, using her own momentum to bring her down, his forearm pressing against her throat. The crowd gasped. Silence rippled through the arena. He expected her to resist, to break him in half. Instead, she stared up at him, chest heaving, golden eyes burning. "You should kill me," she whispered. "That's how the ritual ends." Cale shook his head, voice hoarse. "No. I'm done killing things just to prove I'm alive." For the first time in centuries, the trial of ascension ended without a death. The crowd was stunned into silence. Then, slowly, a murmur began, confusion giving way to awe. The matriarch, seated high upon her obsidian throne, rose. Her armor gleamed like molten metal, and her voice carried through the amphitheater. "The ritual has been witnessed. The gods have chosen. By strength, by defiance, by mercy, he is victor." The crowd erupted, half in outrage, half in reverence. The Thralkai had seen many warriors win through strength, none through compassion. It broke their understanding of victory itself. Cale stood there, bloodied and trembling, as the matriarch's decree echoed through the arena. By ancient law, the victor claims the right of binding. The reward of every mate. He blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "Wait, what?" Vera rose slowly, her expression unreadable. "The law is sacred," she said, voice low. "You have claimed victory. You are entitled to us." The words hung heavy, their meaning impossible. Around them, warriors bowed their heads, not in submission, but recognition. He looked at her, searching her face. "That's not what I wanted," he said quietly. She stepped closer, her hand brushing blood from his cheek. "Want has nothing to do with destiny," she said. "The gods decide. You are one of us now." The crowd began to chant his name, Cale of Earth, the first outsider to survive the death ritual. The sound shook the world. That night, the fires burned high above the city. The Thralkai celebrated not with feasts or song but with silence and reverence. For them, the trial had been divine theater. Its outcome rewrote prophecy. Cale sat alone in the chamber they'd given him, part prison, part shrine. The armor he'd worn during combat lay discarded beside him. His body ached in every place imaginable, but his mind refused to rest. The words, "every mate," echoed in his skull like a curse. He didn't even know what it meant in their culture. Ownership, honor, obligation. All he knew was that the Thralkai didn't take oaths lightly. When the door opened, he didn't look up. "If you're here to kill me," he said tiredly, "get in line." Vera's voice answered, calm and cool. "No one will kill you. You belong to us now." She entered the chamber, her armor replaced by ceremonial cloth, deep crimson against her emerald skin. The flickering torchlight turned her eyes to molten gold. You misunderstand our right, she said. To claim every mate is not to own them, it is to bear their bond. You are bound to all who serve the ritual. You carry their legacy, their strength. Kale frowned. You mean responsibility. Among us, she said, they are the same. She stepped closer, the faint scent of ash and metal surrounding her. You changed the ritual, she continued. You taught us that mercy does not weaken victory. He met her gaze. And what does that make me now? She smiled slightly. A mistake the gods chose to keep. Outside, the city erupted with ritual drums again, this time not of battle, but of recognition. The air shimmered as firelight danced across the towering obsidian spires. Kale stood beside the window, watching alien stars burn above a world he had never meant to touch. I'm not one of you, he murmured. Vera stepped beside him, her reflection glowing in the glass. You are now, she said softly. And whether you accept it or not, every heart that beats for the Thralkai will answer to yours. He turned, meeting her eyes. Then what happens to us? She held his gaze for a long moment before replying. That, she said, depends on what you do with what you've earned. The night stretched long and uncertain. Outside, the stars bore witness to a truth neither could yet understand, that a single act of mercy had cracked open a civilization built on ritual death. For Kale, it was survival. For the Thralkai, it was revelation. And for Vera, it was something even deeper, a question that had no translation, only feeling. As she left his chamber, her voice lingered in the air, soft and dangerous. Sleep, human. Tomorrow, the world you changed will demand to know why. Dawn rose like liquid fire over the Thralkai capital, bleeding through the haze that hung above the arena city of Varten. The air still smelled of smoke and blood, remnants of the night-long celebration that had shaken its ancient spires. From his chamber's high balcony, Kale watched as lights spilled across roofs shaped like the wings of sleeping beasts, each one carved from blackstone that gleamed crimson at sunrise. Below, crowds gathered in ritual procession, their chants rhythmic, reverent, and hauntingly beautiful. It wasn't adoration he heard, it was transformation. They weren't celebrating him, they were celebrating what his survival had forced them to question. For a species that worshipped strength, the idea that mercy could redefine victory was a tectonic wound that wouldn't heal quietly. He leaned on the railing, the alien wind brushing against his scarred skin. His muscles ached from wounds patched by medtech far beyond Earth's reach. Tiny filaments under his skin glowed faintly, products of Valerie nanotherapy the Thralkai had stolen generations ago. He flexed his hand, watching faint light thread between his knuckles. Somewhere in his chest, the weight of what he'd become pressed heavier than any wound. He'd won by accident, yet the accident had rewritten law. The rite of binding was sacred, older than their written history, and now he carried its burden, a title that made him both honored and trapped. Every mate, the matriarch had decreed. He didn't know whether to laugh or run. The heavy doors opened behind him, the metallic scent of oil and ceremonial dust preceding Vera's entrance. She wore armor again, but lighter this time, the kind used for escort rather than battle. Her crimson hair was bound in a single braid, the end tipped with a silver clasp engraved with the sigil of the matriarch's house. They await you, she said, her voice even but softer than before. Kale turned, squinting slightly in the glare. Who's they this time? The council, she replied. And the matriarch herself. You are to stand before them at the Hall of Oaths. He groaned. Guess sleeping in wasn't part of the prize. Among us, she said with a faint smile, sleep is surrender. And you, Kale of Earth, cannot afford to surrender. The Hall of Oaths was unlike anything he had ever seen. The architecture was alive, formed from a single living stone that pulsed faintly as if breathing. Pillars carved in spiraling motifs of warriors, beasts, and suns lined the vast chamber. The matriarch sat at its center upon a dais of molten metal cooled into mirror sheen, surrounded by 12 counselors draped in ceremonial bronze. Their eyes glowed faintly, bioluminescent veins tracing beneath emerald skin. Kale stood before them, bare-chested save for the ceremonial sash Vera had forced him to wear. Every gaze in the room was heavy, weighing him as though he were a weapon too dangerous to remain unsheathed. "You stand as victor of the ascension," the matriarch intoned. "By blood and defiance, you altered the right. Tell us, human, what do you claim?" Kale swallowed, his throat dry. "I didn't claim anything," he said. "I just didn't want to kill someone who didn't need to die." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Shock, disapproval, curiosity. The matriarch leaned forward slightly, her armor catching the firelight. "Mercy in battle is weakness," one counselor hissed. "It risks the collapse of hierarchy." Another countered, "Yet he lives, and she does not challenge him. Perhaps hierarchy needs collapse." The matriarch raised her hand, silencing them. Her gaze bore into Kale like heat. "You misunderstand the consequence of your act," she said. "By sparing your opponent, you did not only win, you bound the Thrallkai to your resonance. You are, by ancient decree, our new war sire." The term struck him like a physical blow. "War sire," he echoed. "I'm not leading anyone. I'm not even one of you. And yet you are," she said softly. "You survived our gods." After the assembly, Kale walked in silence beside Vera down the marble corridors that vibrated faintly with the hum of the city's energy conduits. "War sire," he muttered. "Sounds like a bad job title." She gave a low laugh that surprised even her. "It means more than command. It means connection. Every Thrallkai fighter who enters the right now carries your mark. Your mercy becomes part of their song." He glanced at her. "You say that like it's a good thing." "It depends," she said. "The strong will see it as corruption. The wise will see it as evolution." They stopped at a grand archway that opened into an inner courtyard. Here, the air was cooler, scented with smoke and iron blossoms. "You changed our future, Kale," she said quietly. "Do not let it destroy you before it begins." He spent the next weeks confined within the matriarch's domain, his every movement shadowed by guards and whispers. The Thrallkai were divided. Some called him the Unbound, believing his mercy had been divine intervention. Others named him the Breaker, a blasphemer who'd insulted the gods by refusing death. Riots erupted across distant provinces as rival sects debated the meaning of his survival. Vera brought him news each morning, her calm composure hiding what he could tell was fear. "Your existence is tearing us apart," she told him one evening. "Good," he said bitterly. "Maybe something new will grow from the cracks. Or everything will fall through them," she said. He looked at her, seeing exhaustion where there had once been unshakable pride. "You're afraid of what I've started," he said. "I'm afraid of what we will become," she whispered. One night, unable to sleep, Kale wandered through the temple gardens. The alien moon hung low and red above, reflecting off pools lined with obsidian tiles. He found Vera there, standing beside a brazier, the flames painting her features in gold. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She didn't turn. "Sleep is for the unburdened," she said. "And I am not unburdened." He approached slowly, the night quiet save for the hum of distant energy lines. "You could have killed me in that arena," he said softly. "Why didn't you?" She looked at him then, eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Because you didn't fight like them. You fought like something that refused to end. I wanted to understand that." "And now?" he asked. Her lips curved faintly. "Now I think I do." The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. Her gaze lowered to his chest, tracing the faint luminescent lines the medtech had left there. "You carry our healing," she said quietly. "Our blood, in part, runs through you now." "Guess that makes me half yours," he said. "Not half," she murmured. "Bound." She stepped closer, her breath warm against his skin, her scent sharp like ozone and stone. For a moment the space between them dissolved, the warrior and the captive, predator and prey replaced by something raw and uncertain. "You changed my people," she whispered. "And you changed me." He looked down at her, heartbeat thunderous. Then maybe that's the point, he said. Change hurts, but it means we're still alive. Their closeness broke when the alarm sounded, a deep, guttural tone that shook the courtyard stones. Vera's expression hardened instantly. Intruders, she hissed. The dissidents have come. From the far archways, armored Thralkai stormed in, bearing red sigils of defiance. The human defile our gods, one shouted. End the corruption. Vera drew her blade in a blur of motion, intercepting the first attacker. Kale grabbed a fallen weapon, adrenaline burning away fatigue. The garden erupted into chaos, flashes of plasma, the scent of burning foliage. He fought with desperate precision, blocking a strike that would have cut him down. Vera moved beside him like liquid fury, each motion a dance of violence. For the first time, they fought as one, not enemies, not captor and captive, but partners forged in necessity. When the last dissident fell, silence returned except for the hiss of dying flames. Vera leaned against a pillar, blood streaking her armor. You fight like chaos itself, she said, panting. And you move like meaning, he replied, wiping blood from his brow. She gave a low laugh despite the exhaustion. Perhaps the gods knew what they were doing after all. The matriarch's guards arrived minutes later, surrounding them with torches and questions. The dissidents were captured, their cause declared heresy. But Kale saw the fear in their eyes as they were led away, the fear of change, the fear of a world rewritten by mercy. It wasn't over. This was only the beginning of something larger, something no one could control. In the days that followed, Kale's bond with the Thralkai deepened. Warriors sought his counsel, scholars asked for his perspective on human instincts, and priests debated whether he was God-touched or cursed. Through it all, Vera remained his shadow and his equal, bridging the gap between his humanity and their alien code. Together they trained new warriors, not to kill without question, but to understand why they fought. Strength without empathy is emptiness, he told them. Survival without purpose is extinction. The young listened, hesitant but eager. The old watched, wary. Slowly, painfully, the Thralkai began to change. And in that fragile transition, something between Kale and Vera evolved too. Not romance in the human sense, but an intimacy born of shared defiance. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Kale stood at the edge of the arena where it had all begun. The sands were clean now, the air filled not with chance but quiet. Vera joined him, her armor gleaming faintly in the dying light. Do you regret it? She asked. Surviving, he said. No. Regret doesn't change anything. She nodded slowly. Then what comes next? He looked out at the horizon, where storm clouds gathered. Whatever we make of it, he said. But if I've learned anything, it's that survival isn't the same as victory. She smiled faintly. Then teach us the difference, Kale of Earth. He turned to her, eyes steady. Only if you teach me how to stop running. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain, a rarity on their scorched world. Above them, thunder rolled like distant drums, echoing the rhythm that had once called for blood. Now it sounded different, almost peaceful. The gods, if they existed, were listening. And for the first time, perhaps they were learning too. Rain fell like silver dust across the city of Varten, a rare phenomenon that sent whispers through the streets. For the Thralkai, rain was considered divine breath, an omen that the gods were speaking. The droplets hissed as they met the hot stone, releasing faint trails of steam that curled upward like incense. From the balcony of the Hall of Oaths, Kale watched the water fall upon the blood-stained sands of the arena below. It blurred the sharp edges of the battleground, softening the scars of countless rituals. To him, it looked like the planet itself was finally exhaling. The city felt quieter, the chants fewer. But beneath the calm, he could sense unrest gathering like thunder just beyond the horizon. Mercy had changed their world, but not everyone agreed on what that meant. Vera stood beside him, her armor removed, her emerald skin glistening beneath the rain. She wore a simple ceremonial mantle, dark red, edged in silver filigree, that left her shoulders bare. Her red hair, unbound for once, fell like fire down her back. They call this cleansing, she said softly. But cleansing implies filth. He looked at her, brow furrowed. You think what we did was wrong? I think it was inevitable, she replied. Change is never clean. She turned her face toward the storm, golden eyes reflecting lightning. You've undone something sacred, Kale. The trial of ascension was the spine of our identity. Without it, my people are unsure what they are. He folded his arms, rain running down his scars. Sounds familiar. Humanity's been breaking its own gods since we learned how to stand. Her lips curved faintly at that. And what did you find in the ruins of your gods? Ourselves, he said simply. Sometimes that's worse. The silence between them felt heavy but not hostile. She studied him for a long moment before asking, Do you ever wonder if you were meant to survive? Every day, he admitted. But I stopped waiting for meaning to catch up. It never does. Her gaze softened. Then maybe meaning isn't given. Maybe it's made. Before he could respond, the doors behind them opened, and Lyrek, the matriarch's second, approached, his armor slick with rain. The council summons you, he said, his voice tight. The dissidents have gathered beyond the southern walls. They demand blood in the name of the old gods. The council chamber was ablaze with tension when they arrived. 12 seats encircled the matriarch, her expression carved from steel. Holographic projections flickered above the table, displaying the growing insurgent camps outside the city. 3,000 warriors march under the old banners, Lyrek said. They refuse to accept the human's authority or the new creed. Their leader, Torvath, was once your pupil, Vera. Her eyes darkened. He was a child of pride, not purpose. The matriarch turned to Kale. They will not listen to reason. Their faith is unshaken. Kale leaned forward, his tone steady but firm. Then maybe faith isn't what we need to challenge. Maybe it's fear. The council murmured. They're not afraid of us, Lyrek said. They're afraid of becoming like you. Exactly, Kale replied. So show them it's not something to fear. Vera gave him a sharp look. You would face them. No, he said. I'd stand before them. The matriarch's golden eyes narrowed. You intend to reason with zealots? No, he said again, slower. I intend to remind them what victory really means. The chamber fell silent. After a long pause, the matriarch rose. Then so be it. You will go at dawn. But know this, Kale of Earth, if you fall, your mercy dies with you. He met her gaze without flinching. Then let's make sure I don't. As they left the hall, Vera caught his arm. You're walking into a storm, she said. You think they'll spare you just because you changed the law? They won't, he said. But maybe they'll see something worth keeping alive. At sunrise, the city's gates opened to a vast plain of scorched stone and smoke. The dissidents had gathered there, their banners black against the pale sky. Torvath stood at their head, a towering figure with eyes like molten amber and scars carved in ritual patterns down his arms. His armor was adorned with bones, his presence radiating fury. You, he growled as Kale and Vera approached. The false victor. The gods do not bleed for you. Kale stopped a few meters away, hands empty, his weapon sheathed. Then maybe they should. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Torvath sneered. You think to preach mercy to warriors? No, Kale said. I came to remind you that mercy takes more strength than cruelty ever will. Laughter erupted from the ranks. Vera's hand hovered near her blade, but Kale lifted his arm. No. Let them listen. He spoke louder, his voice carrying across the plain. I know what it means to fight for survival. I know what it costs to win. You call me outsider, but I've bled on your sands. I've heard your gods stay silent when you scream for them. Maybe they're not gods at all. Maybe they're just echoes of what you used to be, afraid. The words struck like lightning, cutting through the derision. Torvath snarled, stepping forward. Blasphemy. Truth, Kale countered. If your gods demand death to feel alive, then they've forgotten what life means. The tension snapped when Torvath roared and charged. Vera moved to intercept, but Kale stopped her with a look. Let him, he said quietly. The impact came hard and fast, two bodies colliding like planets. Torvath's blade flashed, but Kale caught it between his palms, the edge slicing into his flesh. Pain seared through him, but he didn't fight back. Instead, he pushed forward, locking eyes with the enraged warrior. Kill me if it proves you're right, Kale said through gritted teeth. Show them that strength means nothing but the sound of dying again. Torvath hesitated, muscles trembling, rage cracking under something deeper. The watching warriors murmured, uncertain. For the first time, doubt rippled through their faith. Kale twisted the blade from his hands and threw it aside. Your gods aren't watching, he said. We are. And we're the ones who decide what we become. Silence followed. Then, slowly, Torvath sank to one knee, his head bowed. The crowd wavered, then followed, kneeling as thunder rolled across the sky. Vera exhaled sharply, eyes wide. You mad fool, she whispered. You won without a weapon again. Guess it's becoming a habit, he said, blood dripping from his palms. They returned to the city as the storm broke, lightning splitting the horizon in white arcs. The matriarch awaited them, her expression unreadable. You have silenced rebellion without spilling blood, she said. This is twice now you've rewritten our laws. Kale's voice was rough. Then start writing better ones. A pause, then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Perhaps it is time. She turned to Vera. And you, your loyalty is tested and proven. You will stand as warden beside him. Vera bowed her head slightly. It will be done. When the chamber emptied, she turned to Kale. You realize you've become legend, don't you? He shook his head. Legends are just lies we tell to make pain sound noble. Then what are you? She asked. He looked out toward the rain-soaked horizon. A reminder. Days passed. The city changed. The arenas were repurposed into training grounds where combat became ritual discipline, not slaughter. Young warriors studied human history alongside Thralkai doctrine, learning from both their triumphs and their failures. The old gods were not erased but reinterpreted, symbols of growth instead of fear. Vera oversaw the new generation, her authority unquestioned. Kale became a living bridge between two species, his blood carrying both legacy and burden. But peace, as always, came with a cost. He grew restless, haunted by dreams of earth, of oceans, wind, and laughter long lost. One evening, he confessed it to her. I don't know who I am anymore, he said. A human who doesn't belong to earth, or a god who doesn't believe in heaven. Vera touched his arm gently. Maybe you're neither. Maybe you're the space between. Their bond deepened, unspoken but undeniable. There was no word for it in either language, something beyond love or loyalty, born from shared transformation. At night, they would walk through the silent courtyards where rain pooled in the cracks of old stone, and she would tell him stories of her ancestors. In return, he spoke of Earth, not as it was, but as it might have been if humanity had learned sooner what he'd found here, that strength without compassion was just another form of extinction. She listened, eyes distant, as though imagining it. Perhaps, she said once, the gods sent you not to survive us, but to save us. He laughed softly. You sure it wasn't just bad luck? All miracles look like accidents at first, she said. But fate, as always, refused to rest. Reports came from the outer provinces, anomalies in the energy network, cities losing power, resonance storms forming in orbit. The Thralkai engineers called it echo, a mysterious distortion spreading through the planet's core. Vera stood beside Kale in the command spire, watching the readings fluctuate. It began after your victory, she said quietly. You think I caused this? He asked. You caused change, she replied. Change always leaves echoes. The distortion pulsed again, strong enough to rattle the floor beneath them. Alarms flared. It's not natural, Lyrek reported. Something old is waking. Kale frowned, memories flashing, the arena's pulse, the ancient chants, the way the ground had seemed alive beneath his feet. Maybe the gods we stopped believing in, he said grimly, weren't done believing in us. Outside, the sky split with light. The light tore through the heavens like the birth of a new sun. It wasn't lightning, it moved too slow, too deliberate. The sky cracked open, veins of gold and white pulsing outward in concentric waves. From the command spire, Kale and Vera watched as the entire horizon bled radiance, the clouds shattering into drifting fragments that glowed like burning glass. The instruments screamed in protest, readings spiking beyond measure. "What is it?" she demanded. Lyrek's voice trembled. "The echo has reached critical amplitude. It's not just energy. It's thought." Kale's stomach turned cold. Thought. A collective resonance, Lyrek said. Billions of signals, harmonizing. Like the planet is trying to speak. The floor trembled underfoot, a deep vibration that crawled through their bones. "It's calling," Kale murmured, his voice barely audible. But for who? Outside, the storm intensified. Columns of light descended from orbit, striking the plains beyond the city. Every impact sent a shockwave that rippled through the ground and the very air. The citizens of Varten flooded the streets, their voices raised in fear and awe. Ancient chants rose instinctively, words not spoken for millennia echoing between towers. "The gods," someone whispered. "They return." Vera turned to Kale, her golden eyes fierce despite the dread rising around them. "We ended their rituals. We silenced their altars. If they return now—" "They're not gods," Kale interrupted sharply. "They're echoes of belief, resonances shaped by centuries of worship. You gave them power every time you killed in their name." She stared at him, realization dawning like a blade's edge. "Then we created them. And now," he said grimly, "we have to stop them." The first manifestation appeared at dusk. From the molten plain beyond the city walls, a figure rose, towering, half light and half stone, its form shifting with every pulse of energy. Its face was featureless, yet its presence carried unmistakable intent, judgment. The ground trembled with its steps, each one leaving molten impressions that hissed into smoke. The Thralkai warriors who saw it fell to their knees, weeping, chanting ancient verses. Kale stood on the battlement, rain and heat mingling against his skin. "If belief brought it here," he said, "then disbelief might send it back." "You intend to talk to a god?" Vera asked. "No," he said, drawing his weapon. "I intend to remind it who made it." They met the being in the field of glass where the first ritual had taken place generations ago. The creature's voice wasn't sound, it was vibration, pressing against their minds like a storm surge. "Children who forgot their creators," it thundered. "You defied the covenant of blood. You unbound the right." Kale stepped forward, shielding his eyes from the blinding glow. "We didn't forget," he said. "We grew up." The resonance deepened, shaking the air. "Growth without reverence is corruption. You broke the chain that fed us." "No," Kale shouted, his voice carrying across the wasteland. "We broke the chain that fed you our fear." The being paused, its form flickering. "You feed on belief," Kale said. "But belief doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to those still alive." Vera stood beside him, her armor gleaming in the unnatural light. "Our strength no longer needs sacrifice," she said, her tone steady. "You are the echo of a past that learned nothing but pain." The entity tilted its massive head. "Then you will learn what silence costs." The ground split, magma pouring upward as more figures emerged. Dozens, then hundreds, their shapes fluid, their voices merging into a terrible chorus. The Thralkai armies formed ranks around Kale and Vera, weapons humming with energy. For the first time in history, gods and mortals faced each other as equals. Kale tightened his grip on his blade. Guess we're past negotiation, he muttered. Then we fight, Vera said. Together. The battle that followed defied language. Energy clashed with matter, thought with will. The gods, if they could still be called that, moved like storms, every gesture reshaping the battlefield. The Thrallkai fought with unmatched ferocity, their discipline and unity turning chaos into rhythm. Vera was a whirlwind of crimson and silver, her blades singing arcs of light through divine flesh. Kale fought differently, wild, instinctive, unorthodox. He leaped onto the creature's arm, driving his blade deep into its surface. The metal hissed as if struck by fire, and the entity howled in a sound that wasn't sound but pressure. They bleed, he shouted. They're not gods, they're memories that can die. As the tide turned, lightning split the sky once more, and the lead entity reformed itself from the fragments of the fallen. We are the faith that made you, it thundered. You cannot kill what you once were. Kale's blade cracked under the strain, energy surging through his arms. He fell to one knee, the heat searing his skin. Maybe not, he gasped. But I can outlive it. The creature reached for him, its hand larger than a starship. Before it struck, Vera vaulted between them, her twin blades crossed. The impact threw her backward, her armor fracturing in bursts of light. Kale caught her as she fell, her breath shallow. You always have to make an entrance, she whispered, blood tracing down her temple. You always have to save everyone, he said. One of us needs better habits. He set her down gently, then turned toward the glowing monolith that served as the entity's core. The storm howled, lightning striking so close it burned the air. Kale staggered forward, each step heavier than the last. You fed on belief, he shouted through the chaos. Then choke on this. He drove what remained of his blade into the ground, channeling the energy pulsing through his veins. The nanofilaments the Thrallkai had implanted years ago lit up like fire under his skin, forming a web of radiant veins. The resonance built within him, merging human will with alien technology. The entity faltered, sensing the shift. Kale. Vera called, struggling to rise. You'll burn. So will they, he said, and the ground exploded with light. The blast rippled outward in concentric circles, each one erasing a fragment of divine matter. The entities screamed, not in fury, but in fear. Their forms fractured, dissolving into shimmering dust that the wind carried away. The light consumed the horizon until there was nothing left but silence. When the brightness faded, Kale lay motionless in the center of a crater, smoke rising from his body. The gods were gone. The rain returned, falling softly on the battlefield. Vera crawled toward him, pain etched into every movement. Kale, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't you dare. She reached him, her hands shaking as she touched his face. His eyes flickered open, faintly glowing with residual light. Told you, he rasped weakly. Not gods. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. You're impossible. Yeah, he said, voice fading. That's kind of our thing. He survived, though barely. 4 days, he drifted between waking and dream, haunted by visions of light and sound. In his delirium, he saw Earth's oceans, Syrah's violet glow, and the faces of every being he'd ever spared. When he finally woke, it was to Vera's quiet presence at his side. Her hand rested on his, grounding him to reality. The gods? He asked, his voice hoarse. Gone, she said. The resonance collapsed. The people are rebuilding. He nodded slowly. And you? Still here, she said softly. Still bound. Guess we're both terrible at letting go, he murmured. She smiled faintly. It's how we survive. Weeks passed, and the Thrallkai world began to heal. The skies cleared, revealing stars untouched by divine fire. Cities that had trembled under the weight of belief now thrummed with the quiet hum of renewal. The matriarch abdicated her throne, declaring that no single will should rule a people reborn. Councils formed, and Kale found himself at the center of a new movement, one that believed not in gods or war, but in choice. He trained new leaders, taught them the old human paradox, that freedom was both gift and burden. The arenas became sanctuaries, their sands transformed into gardens of remembrance. Where once blood had flowed, now water did, symbol of life returned to those who had forgotten how to live. One evening, as the sun set in tandem, Kale and Vera stood atop the rebuilt spire overlooking the endless plains. "It's strange," she said. "Without war, the silence feels heavier." "That's just peace," he said. "We're not used to it." She glanced at him, the wind teasing strands of red hair across her face. "Do you think it lasts?" "Nothing does," he said. "But maybe that's what makes it worth keeping." They stood in silence for a while, the world below bathed in amber light. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter. "You gave us mercy. You gave us rebellion. What will you give us next?" He smiled faintly. "A chance to make our own mistakes." Far below, the first generation born under the new dawn trained in open fields, their weapons blunt, their lessons shaped around restraint and empathy. They no longer fought for gods, they fought for balance. The old songs of death were replaced by hymns of memory, sung not in sorrow but gratitude. Kale watched them, feeling both pride and weariness. He wasn't a god, and he wasn't a savior. He was something simpler, a man who had refused to die when death was expected of him. In that refusal, he had given an entire world permission to live differently. The thought filled him with quiet satisfaction and melancholy alike. That night, as stars blanketed the sky, he found Vera waiting by the edge of the terrace. "You'll leave," she said softly. It wasn't a question. He nodded. "There's more out there. More worlds like this. More people who still think strength means destruction." She studied him for a long time, then reached out, touching the scar on his shoulder where divine fire had once burned. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "That you won't forget who you fought for." He smiled. "I won't. But I might forget how to stop fighting." She stepped closer, pressing her forehead to his. "Then take our memory with you. Always," he whispered. When he departed at dawn, the city gathered to watch. His ship, a relic of human design retrofitted with Tranquility technology, rose slowly into the sky, leaving trails of light across the clouds. Vera stood at the forefront, her armor gleaming, eyes fixed on the ascending vessel. The people bowed, not in worship but in acknowledgement. Above them, Kale's voice echoed over the comms, steady and resolute. "Don't build statues," he said. "Build better days." Then the ship vanished into the light of the rising suns, and Vera whispered into the wind, "We will." High beyond the stratosphere, Kale gazed at the stars stretching endlessly ahead. His reflection shimmered faintly in the viewport, scars, determination, and a trace of something eternal. He thought of Earth, of Vera, of all the lives he'd changed by accident and choice alike. The universe hummed around him, alive and infinite. "All right," he said quietly. "Where to next?" The stars flickered in answer, like laughter in the dark. The stars stretched endlessly before him, a sea of fire suspended in black glass. From the cockpit of his ship, Kale watched their slow drift, feeling each glimmer like the beat of a distant heart. It had been 3 months since he'd left Vartan behind, 3 months since the twin suns faded in his rear sensors, leaving him with only the hum of engines and the memory of her voice. Silence had become his companion, vast and honest. Out here, there were no gods, no rituals, no crowds demanding meaning. Only the slow turning of existence itself. Yet, even in the quiet, he carried echoes, the laughter of warriors learning peace, the tremor of belief reshaping into understanding, the ghost of Vera's breath against his skin as she'd whispered goodbye. He wasn't alone, not really. The universe itself seemed to breathe with him. The ship's console flickered, a faint warning tone snapping him back from memory. "Power drift on subreactor 2, the system announced in a voice he'd chosen to sound like hers, steady, precise, unyielding. He adjusted the controls, fingers gliding over the glowing runes. The interface was hybrid now, part human technology, part Thralkai bioengineering. The veins of the ship pulsed faintly, alive with organic current. He smiled faintly at the irony. Even his vessel was a product of coexistence. "Easy, girl," he murmured, patting the console. "We're almost there." Ahead, a star system shimmered with faint blue light, its central planet wrapped in haze. The sensors identified it as uninhabited but rich in mineral deposits, and more importantly, quiet. He needed quiet. As he descended through the upper atmosphere, the ship rattled gently, streaks of plasma painting the viewport in molten colors. The planet below was barren, a vast expanse of silver dust and jagged stone ridges stretching beyond sight. It reminded him of the arena, beautiful and brutal. He landed near a canyon rim, the engines sighing into stillness. When the ramp lowered, wind swept inside carrying the cold bite of untouched air. He stepped out, boots crunching against fine ash, and breathed deeply. For the first time in weeks, he felt small again, and it was a relief. "All right," he said softly, looking at the horizon. "Let's see what's left of the galaxy." He spent days mapping the terrain, cataloging mineral formations and dormant energy veins, but his thoughts always drifted back to the Tranquility. Reports still reached him through encrypted transmissions, Vera's voice occasionally breaking through static. The messages were brief, formal, yet laced with warmth she didn't bother hiding. "The new generation trains without killing. The children ask about you. The elders argue, as they always will. You would laugh." He read those lines again and again until he knew them by heart. Once, she added simply, "We found rain again." That one made him stop working altogether. He'd imagined her standing beneath that downpour, eyes closed, feeling the world forgive itself. One evening, as he reviewed his field data, the ship's sensors caught an anomaly, an energy signature too rhythmic to be natural. He followed it to a nearby ravine, where the rocks pulsed faintly with light. At first, he thought it a mineral reaction, but the glow intensified when he approached, resolving into intricate patterns etched beneath the surface. Recognition hit him hard. The geometry was unmistakable, Thralkai design, fused with human fractal logic. "Vera," he whispered. "You left me a trail." He knelt, tracing the symbols with gloved fingers. They hummed faintly, responding to his touch, projecting a soft holographic image into the air. Her face appeared, serene, distant, shimmering with distortion. "Kale of Earth," she said, her voice both near and infinite. "If you found this, then you still walk the line between hope and exile." The message played in fragments, fading between static and light. "You once told me mercy is stronger than fear. I believe you now. The gods are gone, but their echoes remain, in the hearts of those still afraid to live without them. I am leading the next generation beyond the old borders, into the void you once called home. Perhaps we will meet there, between the stars." The image flickered, her eyes softening. "If we do not, then remember, you did not break our faith. You freed it. And whatever world you build next, build it as you did everything else, by accident and courage." The projection vanished, leaving him in silence. For a long moment, he knelt there, the glow fading from his palms. Then he laughed quietly, the sound raw and real. "Guess you finally got the last word." He recorded his reply that night under the open sky, using the same resonance channel she'd embedded in the rock. "Hey, warrior," he began, his voice low. "You always did like your riddles. I'm still alive. Surprise, surprise. Found your little breadcrumb. You'd like this place. No temples, no gods, no crowds. Just space to think. I think that's what we were always fighting for, huh? Space to breathe." He hesitated, glancing up at the stars. "You'd say I'm sentimental. Maybe I am. But if your people ever forget why they changed, remind them of this. A human with no plan and too much heart accidentally taught an empire to stop bleeding for ghosts." He smiled faintly. "You were the best mistake I ever made." He ended the recording and sent it into the resonance grid, watching as light rippled outward like ripples on dark water. Over the following weeks, Kale began constructing something new, a small outpost built not for conquest or refuge, but continuity. He used alien alloy and human design, the walls curved like the petals of a living flower. Inside, he carved the Creed of Mercy onto a single stone tablet, its inscription written in both tongues. It wasn't scripture, it was memory. Strength finds purpose only when shared. Victory is hollow without understanding. Life is sacred not because it endures, but because it ends. He set the tablet in the center of the chamber and left the door open to the wind. If anyone ever came here, Thrall-Kai, human or otherwise, they'd find a place where silence meant peace, not absence. The years blurred. His hair silvered, his scars deepened, but his eyes stayed bright. Wanderers found him, pilots lost to space, scavengers fleeing war, refugees seeking purpose. He taught them what the Thrall-Kai had taught him in return, that survival isn't defiance, it's connection. Slowly, a small settlement grew around his outpost. They called it Haven's Edge. No one ruled it, and no one prayed. They simply lived, building homes out of shipwrecks and laughter. Sometimes at night, he'd see strange lights streaking across the upper sky, fleets of Thrall-Kai vessels exploring beyond their solar reach. He'd stand outside, feeling the wind against his face, and wonder if one of them carried her. One night, the stars pulsed in unison, just once, bright, brief, deliberate. The settlement awoke to see the sky alive with spectral patterns, dancing like auroras. The lights formed the old Thrall-Kai sigil for unity, two blades crossing over a single heart. Kale smiled, understanding instantly. "You made it," he murmured. The villagers gathered beside him, awestruck. "What is it?" a young girl asked. "A promise kept," he said softly. The lights faded, but something inside him stayed illuminated. He felt it in his bones, the same resonance that had once tied him to her, still humming faintly, eternal. He lived long enough to see Haven's Edge become a thriving colony, a mosaic of species and stories, all bound by one shared truth. They built without altars, fought only to defend, and sang their history as a warning rather than worship. When Kale's final day came, he didn't fear it. He sat beneath the open sky, his back against the stone tablet he'd carved decades ago. The wind carried familiar scents, metal, rain, and distant fires. He closed his eyes, and in the hush between heartbeats, he felt her presence again, as vivid as ever. "You always did keep me waiting," he whispered. A voice like wind answered in his mind, soft and teasing. "And you always did make it worth the wait." He exhaled once, deeply, and the light within him flickered like the dying glow of a distant star. When the settlers found him, they didn't mourn. They built no tomb. Instead, they expanded the outpost into a beacon, sending its light across the void. Ships passing through distant systems would sometimes pick up the signal, a simple, repeating transmission encoded in 2 languages. Mercy is not weakness. Compassion is not surrender. Love is not loss. To some, it was a myth. To others, a warning. But to those who truly listened, it was a map, a reminder that humanity's greatest victory was never survival itself, but the courage to redefine it. And far away, across the silver expanse of time, a voice whispered through the static of the cosmos, carried by resonance older than any god. "Well fought, Kale of Earth. The galaxy remembers." The stars shimmered in response, as if bowing to the echo of a man who had taught them to feel.